Today we are diving deep into one of the most powerful and honestly most misunderstood forces in American life, the military-industrial complex. We're literally going to follow the money and see how a decision made in Washington, D.C. can change what's for dinner at a family's table hundreds of miles away.
And we're going to start with a paradox. It's really a story of two completely different American realities, ones that are happening at the exact same time. So on one side, you've got this number, $1.5 trillion. That's the proposed annual U.S. military budget. I mean, it's a record-breaking figure that is so massive, it's kind of hard to even wrap your head around it.
And then, on the other side, you have Brenda. She works at a little cafe in South Baltimore, she makes $16 an hour, and she just found out her food stamps were cut off. So her reality isn't about trillions of dollars, it's about figuring out how to make ramen noodles feel like a real meal for her and her daughter.
And that right there is the central question, isn't it? How can a country that's proposing a $1.5 trillion military budget also be home to Brenda, who's just trying to afford fresh fruit for her kid? How are these two worlds possibly connected? Well, to find out, you have to follow the money through a system that's been built up for decades. And that system, it has a name. It's often called the permanent war machine. At its core is this thing called the military-industrial complex. And really, it just describes this incredibly powerful, tangled relationship between three main players. You've got the politicians in government who control the money, the military that uses the weapons, and of course, the private corporations that build those weapons. And here's the thing. Each group benefits from the others, creating this cycle that just keeps feeding itself.
Now, you might think this is some new radical idea, but it's not. The term itself was actually coined way back in 1961. And by the last person you'd expect, a five-star general and a Republican president, Dwight D. Eisenhower. In his farewell address, he warned the American people that this cozy little alliance could become a serious threat to democracy.
And you know, since Eisenhower's warning, the sheer scale has just become, well, staggering. Right now, the United States spends more on its military than the next 9 biggest spending countries in the world combined. And that is the massive pool of money that feeds this entire system.
Okay, so if that much money is being spent, the next obvious question has to be, where's it all going? Who's actually getting rich from all of this? We'll meet the Big Five. These 5 companies, Lockheed Martin, RTX, General Dynamics, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman, they basically run the defense industry. They get tens of billions of our taxpayer dollars every single year. Just look at these numbers. Together, these 5 companies raked in over $146 billion in just 1 year.
And this is where it gets really clear how global conflict turns into cold, hard cash. When Russia invaded Ukraine, boom, General Dynamics stock shot up 34%. After the Hamas-led attacks in Israel, Lockheed Martin's stock surged over 50%. For the people who own stock in these companies, war and instability, they're really, really good for business. In fact, get this, about half of the Pentagon's entire budget, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars every year. It doesn't go to paying soldiers or maintaining bases. It goes straight from the U.S. Treasury into the bank accounts of private corporations like the ones we just saw.
So how does this happen? How is this massive flow of money sustained year after year, no matter who's in charge in Washington? Let's break down the mechanics.
It's often called the Iron Triangle, and here's how it works. Step 1, Congress gives the green light for a huge defense budget. Step 2, the Pentagon takes our taxpayer money and hands out these incredibly profitable contracts to defense companies. Then, Step 3, and this is the really critical part, those companies take a slice of the profits and use it to lobby Congress for, you guessed it, even more spending next year. It's a perfect loop.
And believe me, they are very, very good at lobbying. In 2024 alone, the defense industry had 950 lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Just think about that. That's more than one lobbyist for every single member of Congress. Their entire job is to make sure that money spigot never, ever gets turned off.
So how do they justify these giant budgets? Well, a key tactic is something called threat inflation. It's basically the practice of exaggerating threats from other countries to create this constant feeling of danger. And that feeling of danger creates political pressure to spend more on newer, fancier, and of course, more expensive weapons. The system is also genius at protecting itself. I mean, just look at the F-35 fighter jet. The program costs over $1 trillion. It's massively over budget, and it's been full of problems. But its parts are built by 1,300 suppliers in 45 different states. So now, what member of Congress is going to vote against a program that brings jobs back to their home district? It's been made politically too big to fail.
But this whole self-perpetuating machine, it isn't free. This intense focus on military spending comes with some very real trade-offs and consequences for all of us right here at home.
You always hear that defense spending creates jobs, right? But when you look at the actual data, it's one of the worst ways for the government to create jobs. For every $1 million spent, the military creates about 6 jobs. But that same $1 million, it would create almost double the jobs in healthcare and nearly 3 times as many in education. So how are we paying for all this? Well, more and more, we're just putting it on the national credit card. The U.S. national debt is already pushing $39 trillion, and the interest payments alone on debt from past wars are expected to cost future generations about $6.5 trillion. We are literally asking our kids and grandkids to pay for today's conflicts.
And that brings us right back to Brenda. Her question just cuts through all the noise and gets right to the point. It's a question of priorities. Because when a government decides on its budget, it is making a clear choice about what and who it truly values.
Which leads us to our last question for today, and it loops us all the way back to President Eisenhower and his famous warning.
You know, some experts are now arguing that the very system that was built to protect the nation is actually creating its biggest weakness. I mean, when the interest payments on our national debt are now bigger than the entire Pentagon budget, you have to ask the question, is the debt itself becoming our greatest national security threat?
And really, that's where Eisenhower left it. He didn't have an easy answer. He basically said the only thing powerful enough to balance out the military-industrial complex is us, the public, an alert and knowledgeable population that can force the government's giant defense machine to line up with our actual goals for peace.